Thank you. Good morning. Today is Thursday, November 21st, 2024, and this is the meeting of the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 10:06, and if we could do roll call.
Chair Robert Tripp.
Present.
Scott Brum.
Present.
Glenn Campbell.
Present.
Angela Field. Jason Legree.
Present.
Lisa McGee.
Here.
Steve Parker.
Present.
John Proctor.
Present.
And Connie Talbot.
Angela sent notice she's on her way. She'll just be a few minutes late through a delay. Land acknowledgement. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of the board and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. And moving into disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. I see none, thank you. And then item 4, approval of the minutes that the Renfrew and Area OPP Detachment Board approve the OPP Detachment Board meetings of October 2nd, 2024 and October 16th, 2024 as distributed. I'm assuming people have had a chance to review that in the board package. If I could have someone move those two. Scott and Angela, thank you. And then we move to delegations. So we're pleased to have Mayor Michael Donoghue from the Township of Edmonton-Bromley to do a delegation on the proposed 2025 budget costs sharing. Thank you for coming out on a rainy day when I'm sure you'd rather be on the field.
Thank you very much, Chair Tripp, and actually I can absolve you of any concern in that regard. A rainy day is the ideal day for a farmer to go to town. It is my preferred time, quite frankly. It is when the sun is shining that makes hay and every other job that is affixed to agriculture. I'm sure Councillor Field's very narrow tardiness, but often bovine obstetrics interferes with my attendance as well. In any event, I thank you very much for this delegation. Appreciate it on relatively short notice. I do know you have a lengthy notice period, which is outside of typically what I have become accustomed to, way outside of typically what I've accustomed to. That is somewhat of a lead-in to, I also have to acknowledge the enormity of the task of you designing and building this airplane while you are flying it. What I would charitably say is that the rollout of this has not been a case study for future rollouts to emulate. And I understand the enormity of the challenge that confronts you. I know even as the both the head of council for Edmonton-Bromley, but also the county councillor, there is the duality of the responsibility and obligation and fiduciary responsibility that it carries with it. And I think that for those who may not have experienced that before, that is difficult, and that is all of the folks assembled on the side of the room, of course, for the the board-appointed members to my right, and also eventually, probably within the decade, based on how the Public Appointments Secretariat has functioned heretofore, I think it is safe to say that within a decade there will likely be provincial appointments. In any event, I recognize that. I recognize also in your initial draft budget that you are now building this almost from scratch. And when you are building any edifice, it is incredibly important, vitally important, that the corners be square and the foundation be sound. So I think that you are going to find, I have pages of farm aphorisms, the hen lays the fat part of the egg first, because the hardest job, you want to get that looked after first. So I understand the challenge that befalls you. So ultimately, I'm not here to speak about the budget overall. I recognize the challenge. Where I am here to speak about, and you will see in the charting that I have provided, it is somewhat rudimentary in terms of the aesthetic. I have some facility with Excel, but it is limited. There is also not a PowerPoint for the same reason. Ultimately, what I put together, particularly in the first 4 slides, are alternates. The first one, of course, is the one that your board has already considered, that was distributed with the draft out to each of the participating municipalities. That is also consistent with the billing model that the province, that the OPP have in place, that they, I still refer to it as the new billing model, having been here in from 2010 to now, and I believe it was about 2012 when it was known as the new billing model. It is somewhat anachronistic to refer to it as so continuously, but it still shall be that to me. Ultimately, what it has decided, there was a base cost and there was going to be a call for service. And ultimately, every municipality in this room is paying the exact same freight rate on the base costs. And it's something on the order, I think, of $189, if I'm not mistaken. That's right, $189.44 per property. So ultimately, the discrepancy that anyone will see in the actual policing costs for a municipality are entirely contained with all of the other elements, principally calls for service, but there's also prisoner transportation, court security costs, and things like that, which are also typically determined on a usage basis. But ultimately, the delta that exists between each of our municipalities in terms of our total cost is largely explained by the calls for service. So you will see item 1, the first chart, is precisely plagiarized from Chair Tripp's memo out to the municipalities and consistent with that billing model. Item number 2 is rearranging it, predicated upon what the percentage of the total municipal contribution into the Renfrew Detachment for police services. And you will note in the left-hand column, it is just over $7 million. That is the component for municipal policing costs. When you utilize the percentage of how those costs are apportioned to each of the 7 municipalities, it then yields a delta or a substantive difference in the allocation of the governance costs, which is your board. Item 3 is it is not consistent, and I acknowledge that, it's inconsistent with how police services are paid for in each of our municipalities. I will actually attest to, going all the way back to 2012, this was novel. Everything else that a municipality does in its community is based on assessment. Every single thing. However, that is not the case here, but that is using another comparator to identify what I believe to be an inequity in how the costs are associated. I will at this point acknowledge the budget itself is entirely the authority of this board. The allocation of the costs is the authority of the participating municipalities, and I do acknowledge that, but I recognize that all of those to my left, save Ms. Tabbert from Whitewater region, are here delegated from their individual municipalities and have the capacity to return this to their councils as well. Item 4 is perhaps the most stark. You will note in the first 3 charts there is a consistency essentially in the ranking right across all 3 of them, whether it be households, whether it be percentage of the total service cost, whether it be on assessment. Item 4, you will see there is somewhat of a difference, particularly for the community that has delegated the chair here, Councillor Tripp. And I'm uncertain precisely what that reason is. I'm inclined to think that there is a substantial difference in the population density, if you will, i.e. the population to households, that has skewed it somewhat. But nonetheless, for the purposes of why I am here today, to impress upon this board, and ultimately, hopefully, when you return to your councils, is the per capita costs. And you'll note the substantial difference. Ultimately, in this instance, the Township of Greater Madawaska, the per person cost for the Police Service Board exclusively is $5.72 per person. versus $1.70 in Arnprior and $2 in Renfrew. It also identifies what each of the 7 participants would be, and there are more or less across all of these charts. The delta changes somewhat, but it is consistent. So ultimately, and you'll find also on the next page, charts 5, 6, and 7, mostly I had built up a head of steam as I began to chart to these things, and I had to exhaust that or vent that steam, so I had some interest in doing these and just carried on with them. Ultimately, item 7 I will draw your attention to specifically, and the reason I cited those 2 years is 2010 is the old billing model, and 2023 is the new billing model. And you will see that there was, and at the time of that conversion, largely it was driven because a lot of the more urban communities were finding that there was a disproportionate allocation of policing costs in the larger urban centers. The new billing model was meant to rectify that. What has been the experience since that is that has been maintained, but consistently, and I cannot speak for the other municipalities, consistently in Admast and Brumley, we have seen that degraded, and I use degraded in a beneficial sense, is that we are consistently seeing that our calls for service are beneath what the expectations of the forecasts had been from the get-go. So we have generally seen a reduction in our police contract. So ultimately, all of those were the charts. They do say, they do have a consistency amongst them that show that there is a great disparity, in my estimation, and inequity, in my view, and injustice. The thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around, and perhaps I am wrong, I stand to be corrected, but it seems that there was an openness at this table, your board, to an alternate allocation of the costs, but that there was an adamancy, as I understand it, particularly from the town of Renfrew and from the town of Arnprior, with respect to an alternate allocation. I do note that the Act itself does provide that the costs shall be shared equally amongst the participating municipalities. However, I will note as well that the following clause, Clause 3 in 135, I think it's 135-24, in my wording, I will acknowledge that, but in my paraphrasing Clause 3, it says, we will allow you to do the right thing. And I say that without tongue-in-cheek, because all of these charts, to me, are clearly articulating that it is inequitable, that on a per person, on an assessment, on a households basis, on a percentage of the total costs of policing, you'll note even one of the charts I didn't identify, the governance as a percentage of the total policing costs. Every single one is indicating that there is a disparity. So I'm more than happy to hear of what is the justification. And I recognize that this board doesn't own the allocation of costs, but each of the councils are represented. Unfortunately, there is an absence today, but each of the councils are here. And I would be thrilled if someone could identify for me the justification that these would be allocated on a municipal basis, 1/7 to each of us. So I would yield the floor, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mayor Donoghue. And traditionally, delegations are 10 minutes. We've had the 10-minute delegation, and I would have allowed to continue on because I think this is an important topic, but I would suggest it's worth our while to spend another 10 minutes in conversation and to answer some of the questions and have an opportunity for dialogue around this table. I will say, just in the start of that, the board is a rather unusual model for all of us. And even today, unfortunately, we've been talking now for months to get our name tags off the tables because we're not councillors here. We are board members. And we have a different role and a different fiduciary responsibility at this table. So I think going forward, we'll finally get these off. It's an important, we've talked about it, but it's still there, and it creates a cloud that we are councillors out of this room representing our municipalities. At this table, we represent the board. The other element that I struggled with at the onset, in terms of the flexibility in rates. Our role for the board is not about service delivery. and the actual activity of the OPP. We are a board, first and foremost, to provide a voice from our communities in terms of what we see as the priorities for policing, to create a plan that lays those priorities down onto the OPP, and that we measure and assess and report on the OPP's effectiveness in meeting the needs of the community. So the whole intent of this Community Policing Act was to give the communities a stronger voice as to what they want to see from policing, and to be able to measure and report back to the detachment commander on his or her meeting the targets as laid out. So for that purpose, we have a singular voice as individuals here. It's not a service agreement where it's based on calls for service and population. At this table, it's a different function. So I'll stop there, because I also do recognize the inequality or inequity is something we've been talking about from day one, and it is something I think we need to spend a little time on having a discussion and looking for a way forward. But it does revert back to the municipalities, the 7 municipalities, to land on that alternative model to present to us in terms of how they wish to fund the board. So I'll stop there and open up the floor to thoughts, questions, comments, input.
I think that we're all in a difficult position, but if we do as we are expected and take off our municipal hats when we sit down at this table, I think it would have been a very different discussion. And I think that if I was not, actually physically not on my municipal council, and even if we took away the names of the municipalities listed here, so that it was, municipality A, B, C, whatever, I think that none of us would be willing to sit around the table and actually choose the model that we chose. Or we didn't choose it, but choose the model that ended up coming out. I think that if we made it completely anonymous and we all took our municipal hats off, we would say this is not right. And I think that we should probably work to fix that if we're going to move forward in the manner that the board is expected to.
So, tying back into Angela, I think we look at this act as been, and we're all looking at it going, it's been rushed. There's a whole bunch of things here that really, even if you talk to the OPP, we talk to ourselves and go, or other police boards and go, this has been rushed. And this funding model of by default, it's going to go this way. We've talked before, it should just follow the OPP model. It doesn't make sense. Now, Rob's point about boards, and I think you all know my pet topic of board governance now. For board governance, our fiduciary duty is to the organisation. However, you look at the stakeholders which the council members represent, right? Much as your board members, you still are representative of stakeholders into this discussion. And I think that's where the balance comes in as a real challenge for you guys in terms of, I need to represent the organisation that sent me here and be on the board. And that's normal in many ways. So I think Angela's point about, you can't just put it to one side and say, I'm not representing Admonstone Bromley. You are, right? The Admonstone Bromley is an absolute stakeholder in here, as is Horton, as is Renfrew. They're all stakeholders. And balancing that out to say, none of us agree with the act to say this is how the model works is a safe thing. And I think Rob's had that from other police boards as well. However, I think one of the things to say is saying, if all the police boards can get their acts sorted out, pun fully intended, and go back to the province and say, this needs to change. And we say, this is an interim, right? This is truly an interim. We are, and Mayor Donoghue, thank you, made his comment about saying you're changing engines while the airplane is flying, right? We know that we're in an interim mode, right, from both a budget perspective and even an act perspective. It's in its first year. It's like buying a car, the first model. Nobody ever buys the model of the first version of a car that somebody's made, because version 2 is always going to be better. We know the act needs to be modified and changed to make some changes. But I think that's one of the communication things we have to go back to the municipalities. We're to say, we're knitting this together. We know it doesn't work perfectly. We know it's not good. However, we think it should be changed. This is what we're going to go back with recommendations for change, but at the same time to say, the Act is in its first version, we're in our first version, so it has to change. I think that's another message to get back to municipalities, to say, we don't agree with how the model works. We think this is a better way of doing it. That's not what the Act says. We get it. We're between a rock and a hard place legislatively. And, to your point, then it requires the stakeholders to come together, all the municipalities, to align into what they think would work best. And again, the challenge you guys have as councillors is you leave here as board members, go back to your council seats and say, this is what we need to do, but then you're now fully representing the interests of your councils. And even I can do the math and say, for Renfrew and Arnprior, financially it makes sense to share it equally, right? We get it, but it's not fair on the smaller municipalities. But when they're back at the, so I think, for me, I'm looking at that saying, you as the 7 representatives of municipalities, you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. It's really unfair on you guys. Steve and I as independents can go, it doesn't make sense to us either, but we are not here representing the stakeholders that you are. So I wanted to put that out and say, but I think the biggest message to get back to municipalities is saying, we get it's broken, right? We get it doesn't work perfectly. We, this brand new police board, are doing the best we can with what we've got. If you guys can align, we'll jump in on that. But if you can't align, we're between a rock and a hard place, which is what my Donahue said, is we're caught between what the legislation says and what we have to do. But I think it's really important to communicate that back to the municipalities to say, we know it doesn't work properly. We wish the Act wasn't written this way either. We are going to go back and fight this on your behalf because that's our job. But we need some grace to get this solved. So please, can you sit down at the table and have a conversation, all 7 of you, and try and come to an agreement so we align, because it's not in our power to do it.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Glenn?
And thank you, Mayor Donahue, for bringing this forth today. I have to agree with Mr. Proctor today and Angela, of course. I look at the numbers and again, I have to wear my board hat today. When I was wearing my councillor hat, I heard loud and clear that, where's the glue? This is broken. Something needs to be fixed. Please speak on our behalf. And as our chair is saying, this is the model that was brought to us, and now can we, heat it up and mold it a different way? That's what, we've all seen it and heard it, and, the talk is there. Certainly hearing from you brings it into perspective, and, you look at the numbers here, and, if we're at one end of the street and we know the gas is cheaper at the other end, we're going to go over and send that, save that extra cent. Or if you're walking up the street and you see a quarter, you're going to pick it up. I used to put it in the parking meter, but they're no longer there, and I'm glad to put it back in my pocket. So, I mean, we're all there to represent our townships. And again, when we get here, we are a board. These are the 1, 2, 3s that we've been handed. Do they work?
Thank you.
Remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Lisa? You're good? Okay. Oh, all right.
No, I didn't have my hand up, but.
No, I was just checking so that you felt part of the team.
Oh, I'm definitely feeling one of the team.
Thank you. Jason?
No, I'm okay right now.
Okay,
Just
good.
take it all in here.
So I think we're in agreement on a number of things. This is not an ideal piece of legislation. The first year coming out of the gate is very challenging. It was very challenging for us even to build the budget because there are so many unknowns, and we relied on a lot of other boards and discussion with the association and training that they put at the beginning of the Act. But even within the ministry, they too are recognizing the shortcomings of the legislation in terms of the rush to implement it. That said, our first year, and we've been very open about the transparency on the funding, once we land on the budget and we land on a model, our commitment to the 7 is to report quarterly on actuals to the budget, because it's our first round and we're not quite sure what to expect. But in June, at the midpoint, to have a more robust discussion with actuals and budgets, so we can start thinking about a model for 26 that's going to make sense. So in this first model, for example, we see a contingency fund of $10,000, which is a big contingency for a small budget of 114, but there's so many unknowns. At the end of the 26 period, if we do end up in a surplus, we would go back with a recommendation that we put that into a reserve, which negates the need for that contingency to stay in budgets going forward. Those are the discussions I think we'll have midpoint, but it also gives us a chance to go back to the ministry, and not just our voice at this board, but through the association, through possible delegations at Roma and AMO, to say this is an issue that needs to be fixed. Because it isn't right to have that model. And from some of the larger boards in urban centers, it's not an issue because they all have the money. It's when we get into these rural communities where you have 2 or 3 municipalities with a fairly strong budget, and then we get some of the smaller ones that just don't have the capacity. So I think by the end of the year, we'll have a different approach into the 26 cycle. For now, I think there's an opportunity, or certainly an appetite, maybe perhaps for one more round of discussions. Everyone seems to be landing on the budget. We're hearing that through the councils. There's a couple of questions here and there, but the actual number seems to be good with most. It's just this billing model. And we're all looking at going back to that of which we know, which is the population base or the count or the existing formulas. The Act doesn't prescribe that formula. It says something that we can unanimously agree on, the municipalities. And maybe we look at a different model that we're all going to have to pay a little. This is clearly a downside or a download from the province. But maybe we find a different model where the 2 small municipalities that are really getting caught in this, we can adjust. With those who are seeing a drop, maybe we can look at a model, even if it's a few $1,000s, would go to offset the spread that the 2 smallers are feeling. So there is potential for a dialogue, a quick dialogue, because we're almost at year end, but it's something we could take back and maybe just have an emergency meeting in December with the 7 municipalities, just to have an open discussion on it. Worst case that happens is we end up with the legislation as it stands. Next worst is that there's arbitration, which is very expensive. Best case is we can come to an agreement informally, and we don't need to report that up. It's just once we all agree to, once all 7 municipalities agree to it, we run that for the year. So this has been really helpful.
If I might, just to conclude, Mr. Chair, once again, most appreciative of the opportunity to be a delegation today. Enormously sensitive to the topic that I am speaking to today is outside of the purview of this board. I recognize that your purview, your authority and full authorities with respect to the budget, though subject, of course, to any one of the municipalities, if they are opposed, have the opportunity for arbitration. But this is a much more efficient means for me rather than being a delegate at 6 other council meetings. Having said so, I would be most happy to convene a meeting, to host a meeting of the CAOs, clerks, treasurers, and heads of council of each of my colleagues, the 6 other municipalities at beautiful downtown Admaston Brumley. What I will say with regards to I am quite cognizant that the legislation provides that it shall be equally divided, then it does have the fairly unique clause that then affords each of the municipalities a veto. if it is unanimous, there is no escaping that each municipality then exercises a veto. That's unheard of in my capacity in municipal governance. I'm sure it is rare instances at either a federal or provincial level where unanimity is the benchmark, is the requirement. However, what I will say, even with respect to the legislation that provides that it shall be shared equally, I will quote from you from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. There is a Mr. Bumble in Oliver Twist. Without getting directly into the cause of it, Mr. Bumble is quoted as saying that if that is the law, sir, the law is an ass. And in this instance, I think once again we find that the law and justice are two distinct things. What I will say is, if this is to continue, in my estimation, this will be an original sin. It will not have been visited upon yourselves by yourselves. It is outside of your purview. It is within the municipalities that pay for the police services out of the Renfrew Detachment, that are paying for the governance of the police services out of the Renfrew Detachment. It will absolve. Time does tend to absolve these things at any level of governance, any level of elected office. It will, but it will be an original sin that will stay for a while. I will also say, again, to my colleagues that are here, delegates of municipalities, that each and every one of you were participating in the LEG, the Local Efficiency Group. I think that perhaps there are those, certainly the public appointments are unfamiliar with that terminology. But in that regard, we can only move forward. We are constantly reminded. We have been given monies to engage consultants to find shared services. Shared services have to be based on an equitable and justified and just allocation of costs. If in fact, I will refer you as Councillor Legree, though I am sensitive to what the chair has suggested, Mr. Legree, that you do sit on the council for the town of Renfrew. If in fact Renfrew and Admaster and Brumley were to purchase a tandem truck together, we would hardly be expected to pay 50% if we were going to have 20% of the use of the truck. I don't think anyone would find that justified. I recognize the final comment, Mr. Chair, is this is absolutely not this board's concern, but I am imploring the municipally appointed members, sorry, you are also, no, you are board appointed, I beg your pardon, but I am imploring, beseeching the municipally appointed members to reconsider the allocation of the costs. And as I said, once again, more than happy to host and convene a meeting for a fulsome discussion of said costs. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So we'll close that session of the meeting. You're more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the meeting and listen to our words of
I am anxious to do so because, of course, there is nothing that fills me with joy more than governance. However, I do have a conflict right now, so unfortunately I'm going to have to take my leave. I should note, Mr. Chair, there was another document that I provided that is distributed and is not germane whatsoever to this delegation, but just I'm unsure if board members may be aware of the value for money audit that Bonnie Lysak, the Auditor General for Ontario, completed in 2021 with respect to the 2020 fiscal year, provincial fiscal year, that is ending in March of 2021. And I have, and I will provide, Mr. Chair, to you and to your clerk, the links that you can find the fulsome report. And in addition, there was a follow-up that was completed in 2023 to establish what the OPP may have been done since. But I think that that document will be substantial in guiding what I think the heavy lifting shall be for your board moving forward. In any way, thank you.
And I just want to acknowledge the presence of Mayor Weir from Greater Madawaska in the back. Are you staying for the rest of the meeting, or? Perfect, thank you. Thank you. No, there's fine. The board is, and also Mayor Weir, if you want to come and sit at the, no, you're fine back there. The board is one of the other things in our transition for those who are new in the room is it falls under a different piece of legislation, the Municipal Act, so our meetings are not quite as structured and informal as you'd see under the traditional meetings of council. So sitting at the table is fine. Perfect. So moving into item 6, upcoming business, 6.1, upcoming OAPSB, the Zone 2 meeting, set for November 29th, meeting attendance. Scott?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that I would like to attend.
Okay. In our budget, and this is again for 25, not for 24, if you recall, we talked about having limited, it was 3 or 4, but to give everybody, the intent is to give everybody a chance who wants to go to one of these meetings to go. My preference is for us to get as much exposure. They're good meetings, they're short. This one coming up is in Ottawa, it's in the morning. We do have a budget for 3. If there are other people who wish to attend but do so on their own dime, that's also fine. So I have it in my calendar, but I'm not charging. I'm going to do other business that afternoon, so I'll just drive down and sit through the meeting, get a free breakfast, and listen to the speeches and drive home. But so there's Scott, there's myself. Anyone else interested in attending? Good.
I believe Councillor Tabbert.
Connie's ready? Okay. All right. And Steve?
Yeah, I'm interested, able to, and I've got family in Canada, so
Okay.
low cost, yeah.
Ben?
I'd certainly attend
Yeah.
as well, so.
It's a good meeting because it's within our zone, and the information and the presentations are really informative. Plus, there is a lot of chat in the hallways, which is very helpful in terms of learning what other boards in our specific area are doing. And the costs are negligible. The larger ones are in Belleville, where I think we'll need to be a little bit more stringent with our use of money if we have to pay for hotel rooms, but Ottawa is a pretty easy one. Okay, perfect. Do we need a motion?
Well, are you paying for 3, or is everybody?
Are you claiming? You happy to? I mean, you can if you wish. Sorry, that's putting you on the spot. Why don't we can pay, we can make a motion to pay for 3, which is in our budget.
Okay, well, Glenn and myself are going to ride share down.
Okay,
So,
and you're not staying for a hotel? Are you staying over?
no, we're not
Because
hoteling
the
it.
Shadow's got a deal.
No.
Okay.
We'll be going for the free breakfast and
Yeah, I mean, mileage is not the
Fellowship
issue.
and-
It's the hotel and the meals and everything else, but yeah, okay, perfect. So I don't think we need a motion for that, if we're just... Okay, perfect. 6.2, draft policy review. John, do you want to just, well, John and Carolyn, because you've been working together on them. Or Carolyn, because who's been doing that?
I can cover both the signing authority and the, because I'll do those both. So both policies were drafted up. Thank you, Carolyn, for putting those together. I reviewed, I went through, I made some changes. And then same thing with the signing and delegation authority policy. It's purely financial. And the reason that's kind of important is at some point we step into doing an annual review of the OPP Detachment Commander. That's going to require signing authority, right? Who can sign that? And again, is it chair? Who's approving that process? So we still need some more signing authority pieces. So this one is purely on financial. It's not a blanket signing authority policy. It's a very narrow financial signing authority. And then the abuse, sexual harassment, discrimination piece, very generic. Nothing, surprising to anyone. So again, thank you to Carolyn for drafting that up. I made minor amends, but those two are both out for review and approval.
Perfect, thank you. Questions, comments? I too have read through them. The one on abuse, discrimination, harassment, and violence policy, we for lack of a better word, plagiarized one that was already in existence, which I thought was excellent until Carolyn managed to get her hands on it. And then it is unbelievably strong. Like, she just took it and went, so we are really fortunate to have her providing a second set of eyes and her experience and reaching out to other colleagues. So the documents we're getting are going to be very, very, very solid. So pretty happy with how that's coming along. All right, no other questions. We'll move to 6.3, Administrative Service Agreement with the Town of, oh,
Can I just speak?
yes.
Just double checking, is it, and I know this was an insurance issue, not issue, but something, a compliance with the insurance, is that should the board be formally adopting the abuse, discrimination, harassment, and violence policy today because of compliance with insurance, or are all three going to come back for final adoption at the next meeting?
I think all three to come back at the next meeting.
Excellent.
They know that it's in place. And it's one, when we signed the authority, they suggested any time in the early new year is fine, the long as we've taken steps to bring it in. So we'll do them all once we get them into the format that you want and are happy with them.
Okay, so then through you, Chair, just for all members of the board, if everybody could take a look, I have provided them in draft mode. If everybody could take a look, if there's any changes, I have looked at them multiple times, so I'm sure a fine-tooth comb on spelling and grammar would be appreciated. But if everybody could take a look, provide any suggested changes, and then what I would like to do is at least these three come back for final adoption at the next meeting. Hopefully by then there'll be a number of other ones, again, to go through the same process of draft consideration, discussion, and then back again.
And we need to sign these as individual board members, do we? On the OPP Board Code of Conduct?
My recommendation as part of the policy for the Code of Conduct is that all members of the board actually sign it. I know that's not strictly a requirement under the legislation. I think it's good practice that we ensure all board members have read it, our agreement to it, as part of the mandatory training that was conducted. A review of the legislative code of conduct was reviewed, and as being ensured that you've completed that training, it's definitely you've signed off on that with regards to legislation. However, again, as a board policy, I think it's a good practice, same with any staff members or administrative help that you have on as well. I think it's important that it's at least reviewed. And so that is a component I've added to this policy directly.
Perfect. Questions, comments? Seeing none, thank you. Now to 6.3, Administrative Service Agreement with the Town of Renfrew. I don't know if that should go to Carolyn or to Jason. To Carolyn. Punted.
Through you, Chair. There is an agreement attached in the package. The board at the October meeting had put forward basically a request to have dedicated administrative services with the town of Renfrew for 5 hours a week for my services. This was kind of a dedicated up to 5 hours that would go that would ensure that the board is receiving that time, and that time was allocated. That information went back to Renfrew Town Council in closed session for some discussion, but with a rise in report to say that they were in agreement to proceed with some discussion, and then this is coming forward. I've provided it to the board today for reference. It will go on to the agenda with a bylaw for consideration and adoption from council, for the Renfrew Town Council, at the November 26th meeting. So from that, I would say, Chair, if there's anything that is overly concerning in the agreement, I think it captures the board's intent as well as the town of Renfrew's. But if there's any concern, please let me know, because this will go on the agenda as of tonight for next week's discussion.
Did that just come out on the agenda? When was it posted?
Should have been there.
I mean, I'm only asking because I've been traveling and limited access.
I believe it's in the digital copy, maybe in my printouts today with these. I just kind of gave some highlights for the policies. I might have missed it, but I can certainly get a printout right now.
Okay.
It is on the digital copy that everybody has in there, that was circulated. But let me get a copy printed right now.
Okay, perfect. And do you want to expand on January?
Oh, sorry, I got sidetracked. Sorry, and just further to that, Chair, apparently I can't do two things at once. So I'm just printing this, and I want to expand. So this agreement, what was established and discussed at our October meeting, was to formalize some type of agreement until the end of December. That would allow my services to be utilized by the board until that time. I do know that the board is looking to hire an admin position, or at least move forward in that direction. I do think that it has a lot of value. At times I do find that wearing a clerk hat and recording secretary hat for this board does offer some unique challenges. I do want to let the board know that I guess maybe formally I'm giving my notice as to my services coming to an end as of January 1st. I'm more than happy and have enjoyed the challenges that this has presented over this last year, and I really want to see it through December, but I do encourage the board to move forward with either an administrative option or taking this type of agreement and maybe applying it to another employee within one of the joint municipalities. But it is a lot, and I've had fun, but just to let the board know formally that as of January 1st, I will be dedicating myself fully to the role of town clerk and the town of Renfrew.
Thank you. And I can only imagine with a new CAO coming in and all the transition, it's a chance as well to carve out your new role, which would be helpful. So this agreement is really up until December 31st. If you recall, we had talked about the 5 hours a week to help pull together the policies, and Carolyn is very experienced and skilled at that, so it's up until date has been very helpful, and I'm sure till the end of the year will also be equally helpful to get the other 72 policies in place. Maybe not. Which brings us to the next, oh, sorry, Jason.
Through you, Chair Tripp, I just have a question on that. So, because the budgets and everything is not approved, we can't obviously go ahead with looking for, like, posting out to find somebody to replace, like, we're almost at the end of November, right? So I think it's important. I don't know if anybody sitting here has any ideas, or like, what's our next step to get somebody as of January 1st? Mm-hmm. Because we're kind of stuck. We can't go and look for somebody to take that position until the budget's approved. Mm-hmm. And we're almost at the end of the year, so I don't know what the thoughts are of.
So that was going to be the discussion in 6.4 on the secretarial administration, and how do we move forward?
Sorry, yeah, I'll wait till we get down there.
Okay. All right, we'll open up 6.4 now, secretarial administration. So you're trying to move us along quickly. Okay. Pardon me. It is an unusual time. Pardon me. An unusual time with the budget. I'm the optimist. I'm still hopeful that we will be able to bring the budget together. The actual numbers, I think, we're close on. There's been no serious objection, but it's the percentage. And hopefully, we can have the budget approved. How they're going to pay for it is the second phase of that, which I'm encouraged today that we'd have at least one conversation around that through Mayor Donahue hosting a meeting and seeing if there's any wiggle room, and if there's not, we fall to the default and look for something that's more equitable in the fall. But we are going to need, just with our mandate and our work plan and the things that we are now legislatively mandated to do next year, need to get up and running. And the Inspector General has been very clear that they are allowing us implementation time, but they will come to a point where they're going to ask for our deliverables. So we have a report that's due in June, which will be robust. We have to start the development of a strategic plan that aligns. We have the, I'm blocking the name of it, but the work plan for the priorities. We need to reach out to municipalities and seek their input as to what their priorities are. And this is being done by other boards through survey instruments. But we'll need to get up and running quickly. So before we do that, we need to determine a job description. So there's a lot of steps that can start now without actually spending money until we get to that point, hopefully in another 4 weeks where the budget is in, then we can do the launch of the position. My other concern is not a lot, but there are those in our area who are currently hiring, and that will reduce the pool of potential candidates. So we are going to need to move quickly. And a discussion that I was going to raise at the board is if 2 people could kind of volunteer to start scoping out existing job. We have some job descriptions that have come to us through Carolyn. Scott's found a few. I don't know if there could be 2 people. Go ahead, Scott.
There's the one that I sent you, pretty much nails exactly what we want through discussion. Pretty much it's just going to be a copy and paste. Change the name to Renfrew, and it's done.
Thank you.
So it's something that, you know, I believe I sent 3 or 4 through to Rob already, job descriptions. But there's one that just stands out, and it's apple for apple. It actually came from a police board for the exact same position that we're looking for. I don't know if you had printed those off or no?
No, I wanted to bring it to the table first for discussion.
Okay. So, yeah, and through you, Chair, the possibility that we may need a emergency meeting based on this, because if we, you know, well, now that we're losing Carolyn as of January 1st, I think it does put a fire under the whole situation that we need to go. And I believe everybody that has brought it to council so far, the budget has approved it, correct? Mm-hmm. So I'm like you, I'm pretty optimistic that it's going to, you know,
I'm optimistic in terms of the planning. I lose the optimism until we actually have the signed budget agreed, because I don't want to commit to, I don't think we as a board should commit to someone until we have the authority, the financial authority to do so. We may have an unusual January, but I think we need now to move quickly to get that position. And I'm looking to maybe Steve and Scott, if you two could, would you have time to work on it?
I would love to, yeah.
Pardon?
Yeah, I would love
Okay.
to.
Because you've already done a lot of the legwork. And I don't think I think if we have a meeting in December, bring it back in December, we should have the numbers in the budget in play and then do a launch early January or into January when appropriate. Carolyn?
Through you, Chair. Again, now that the hard stuff has been done to establish this service agreement, if the board has the ability to, again, use this type of service agreement to approach another joining municipality, to set up something similar, right? So that there would be at least some time, some flexibility. I do think that the agreement of a 5 hours is a little bit more palatable in the beginning if a budget is still being discussed at that time. And I'm certainly welcome to share those resources. It just might be something that the board might want to consider.
I think it's a discussion for you two when you're coming up and doing the plan. But I do think we eventually need to really get to that point of independence. And there's the cost. Our 25 budget would not support the funding in here. And we have, as we talk and get through the agenda, there's a couple of other options for us to look at as well. But if you two could take that on and come back at the December meeting, that'd be very helpful. We have website as, sorry, is there any other questions or discussions, thoughts? Angela, you okay? Okay. 6.5 website setup. It's another thing that we need to look at to have ready for the month of January when we start launching. And as we talked at the last board meeting, I think our website will be relatively simple and small and in line with what we have in the 25 budget. Because it's really just to post, it's our marketing tool into the municipalities. It may grow down the road, but I think we need to come up with something early. I'm wondering if we can push that out a little bit, unless there's anyone at the table who has an interest and time to explore some opportunities. It would require an RFP. We need a policy in place. We have all of these things that need the pieces of the puzzle to come together at the same time. But it may be helpful to start scoping out early a rough idea of what is available and what the cost would be. I see Jason's hand starting to go up to volunteer. Yeah. Excellent. Time and eye contact works wonders.
You might have had a snitch, but you've got a job.
But I also saw Steve moving a bit, so if you need help, I saw him kind of...
In the corner of your eye, it might have been John's arm, actually. We're really close, yeah.
So Jason it is. Pardon me. Item 6.6, proposed Roma delegation. I received an email from Scott a few weeks ago asking about, or floating the idea of potentially doing a delegation to Roma. And we've had some discussions on with that. The delegation would be a 15-minute one-on-one with the minister. If we're granted that opportunity, we make application. Sadly, it has to be in within the next 7 days, 6 days. It's the 27th. But it's a very simple, short form. It's an ask. It needs to be surgical in terms of what we're looking for, the background, the facts, how it will influence, and then out the door. But we want to say what the issue is, what the background is, the facts, the considerations, what we're asking for, and how it will help them. In conversations with a few people, we've been floating around the idea of a request for a grant for this fiscal year between now and March 31st of around $25,000. Reason being, it's a simple amount to write a quick contract agreement, and it would be to help further the work that Carolyn has started on the development of policies and procedures. So we've spoken to the Inspector General's office. They're prepared to support it. They see it as valuable. They were also lobbying the ministry when the legislation was being written to have this activity undertaken, and they would come on as a supporter of it. They've also reached out to the ministry and asked for their support. They too think it's a good idea to have something drafted up in generic form. We would use it here, but it could also be used throughout the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards to share with other boards. OASPB would come on as a resource, not a partner. The grant would be with this board, and that would allow us to fund for a very short period of time a few people to do the work that Carolyn has been doing, to continue this until the end of the March 31st. The message to the minister would be the legislation's come out. This is a huge gap that's impeding most boards, and it's inefficient for everyone to go off and do it. We seem to have the reputation of being out of the gate first. The one question that came to me initially is why not to the association? They are limited in staff, and they are one step removed from the operational implementation of the board. So it is better written by a board that's living this now, with their input, with the IG, because the Inspector General's office eventually is going to have to do their implementation review. And if they can have a hand in the development of the policies, it will help that mark in terms of benchmarking of success. And then to the minister, it's a very inexpensive way to bring all of us in at the start with a solid foundation for operational policies, looking at just the 3 that she has done. So we'd need a motion to make that delegation. It would require wrapping up quickly by the 27th the application. And then from there, we would hear from the ministry if it's a delegation they'd support, and then we would have to do a more fulsome briefing note to the officials to have ready for, I think, early or mid-January in advance of the minutes of the meeting. So I will throw that out there. Angela?
A question for you first. Is the board permitted to request a delegation, or does it have to be the 7 municipalities that make the request for the delegation?
It would be delegates from the municipalities on behalf of the board. So we'd have 3 of us make the delegation.
We can't, as a board, can't go to Roma because it's a municipal, so we would have to quick switch our hats and go as elected officials on behalf of the board.
Yes, that was the question. So the OPP Detachment Board here is not able to make the request. It has to be the representatives.
It's a very
On
interesting
behalf
question.
of.
Let me talk to Graham.
Because I think it gets sticky there, and that could lead to our rejection. So we have to be very, very careful how we propose that or request that delegation.
It's a good question. I'm assuming that there is a way, because I've seen other delegations at Roma that are outside the scope of just the elected body. It's, we're hitting a service within our catchment area and rural Ontario. The Articles of Roma is in line with what our ask is throughout the province. So I think it would fit. It's just, and they recognize that under the CPSA, this is about engaging municipalities. But it's worth asking the question before we put it in.
That's just my concern, is because they could look at it and go, they didn't do that right, and they want to stir something up, so no. That's my concern. And if we do have the opportunity, I want to make sure that we do
it
get
right.
in there.
We have one shot at it.
Exactly.
Scott?
And that's it. Like, we've got to ensure that our Ts are crossed, the Is are dotted. But if we don't at least give, if we don't at least give a shot at it, we're no farther ahead. So I do agree that, yes, we have to ensure that, we talk to Graham and, have everything lined up. But the reason why I want to get this done is really my municipal hat for our ratepayers. If we can get some extra stuff that our ratepayers don't have to finance, and we can get a grant going, so I know exactly what you're saying. I would really hate to see us, our next chance at talking to a minister would be AMO.
Angela?
Through you. That's my concern, is that if we don't do this right,
Correct.
if we don't find out exactly how we need to make this request, they might just say no. So I just want that clear, is that we have to tread ridiculously carefully this time around, because it's too long between the next chance.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%, and I'm quite experienced in that realm. Delegations are an unusual event at any level. I mean, that's basically what I was doing the last 2 weeks in Switzerland, is arranging for 15-minute delegations with heads of state, and you have one shot. So you need to be articulate, focused, clear going in. Even the 15 minutes we have is rehearsed like a television show. You don't have a narrative, you have your story, your script, and you do not go off script. And if a minister or an aide asks a question, you're prepared to bring him or her back on script. So it takes a lot of work. It's all reputational. If you mess it up, you're known for that. But the application for the 27th is very high level. It's who we are, what we're looking for, why is it important, and topical, and then from there, the machine, we will determine if it's something the minister wants to have a dialogue about. And what we were informed from Graham and from the staff is it's something that they would support within the bureaucracy, so the minister would know this is something worth taking to have a look at. And that helps the bureaucracy get the contract in place. If it's something they want to do, and we go as a delegation, and they're briefing the minister, and we're coming into the minister as the board, it's very easy for the minister to say, we support. So, sorry, Lisa? And then I'm watching time.
I certainly support any delegation. I think they are fantastic opportunities. We've experienced it firsthand, some of the benefits of doing so. To the point that Mayor Donoghue had made earlier on, if there is an opportunity within those limited 15 minutes to speak to the value for money audit and service levels and accountability, I think that might also help cement the board participation, whether it be as a board or as municipal councillors, and you can, well, there's a lot to be found. I've digested the value for money audit, both the original 21 and then the follow-up in 23, and spent more hours than I can count going through it. And there are gaps. There are some significant gaps. And if there's one role that we have as a board, it is to identify what those gaps are and then seek solutions. And certainly that going to Roma as a delegation is the opportunity to help address some of those. So I would hope that some of that would be included as well.
I would think in 15 minutes our message would be surgical and just on the $25,000 grant. There will be other delegations, both at, I'm going to suggest, county level. I've heard discussions of other, we're not the only board to be looking at taking this to the minister. I think there would be other delegations. We may be able to join a delegation or express our interest in joining, and we can float that at Roma, or sorry, at the Zone 2 meeting. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on the minister at this meeting about OPP budgets and funding in general of the board. Ours is targeted more to implementation, which is what we're focused at, and our role at this table. If that makes sense.
And I would support that. I will unfortunately not be attending Roma this time around, but yeah, I'm crushed actually. But whatever the team decides, I do support any delegation getting front.
Okay, perfect. Scott?
I would put my name down, like, I'll be part of the delegation, but I'm already I'm already applying for 2 delegations myself.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
So, you know, the third one, I'll be there for moral support and whatever help is needed through the board. But I've already got 2 requests in myself. Now, they could be both turned down. I don't know.
All right, thank you. Jason?
I'll also be attending Roma, and we don't have any delegations, I don't believe, from the town coming, so
Okay,
if you
perfect.
need somebody to sit, then I'm there too, so.
Angela, are you attending?
I am attending, and I would be more than happy to join this delegation.
Excellent. Perfect.
I'll bring the pom-poms for outside.
All right. Lisa's not attending. All right, I think we're good. So we have a motion drafted.
Through you, Chair. That the Renfrew Area OPP Detachment Board approve the application for a joint municipal delegation at the upcoming 2025 Roma Conference for a grant request to fund the OPP Detachment Board policy development.
Steve? Glenn?
So we're
All in
looking for a
favor?
mover and seconder, so Steve?
Oh, sorry, Steve
Glenn?
and Glenn, and all in favor? Carried. Perfect, thank you. And I'll reach out in the next day or two. Over the weekend, I'll take some time just to get my feet grounded for the drafting. And then through Carolyn as well, because she is experienced when we have her.
Through you, Chair. It might be worth noting to the municipalities that this is happening.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. I do not have, we're moving into 7.1. Oh,
Through you,
Yes.
Chair. Just with that motion, do we have to add in the names of the board members that's sitting on that, or no? For board approval, or?
no, because at the motion, when it goes through, this is really the request to see if they'll take the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
And then we have the motion on as we draft up. I think that's the traditional way forward. Or would you rather have the names now?
Through you, Chair. I can note the names in the minutes of who will be attending and representing. I think the joint municipality is fine. I do think it's important that the municipalities are made aware.
Yes.
And specifically, the members who are, or who have indicated that they're willing to be part of it, should certainly make sure that their municipalities are aware that they'll be attending and the capacity in which they're attending.
Okay. Perfect. So Chair's report, I have nothing to report because most of this was picked up in conversation through the agenda. Bank and corporate structure update, I'll leave until our next meeting because we don't need the account just yet and there are still pieces in play with Bank of Nova Scotia. And then budget update. There's been a number of municipalities having meetings. Jason, you met with, not met, you attended one yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday evening, I attended the Whitewater Region Council through Zoom just to answer some questions, and they have, pardon me?
Do you want to raise the questions now, or do you want to do that?
Yeah, sure, I can. So one of the questions Mayor Nicholson actually had was with regards to the minutes coming out of these meetings for the closed portion. So if we have a closed portion, they're wondering if the municipalities get the closed piece of the minutes or just what's in opened, just what's in.
Through you, Chair. I would believe that, and legislation I would have double check, but I would say that the closed minutes of the board remain the closed minutes of the board. As municipal reps You are, as municipal reps, yes, you are attending, but the confidentiality of the board, and if you look at the code of conduct, does clearly state in that the confidentiality of the board remains confidentiality of the board.
Yes, that's what I thought. I just said I'd double check. And then the second question was with regard, because they have two boards kind of within their region. So if a decision or something is made at this board, how does that affect the other portion of the township that's on the other side of the, with the other board, was the other question they had, so.
That's it. That's an interesting
You're,
question.
yeah, Adnas and Bromley would be in the same boat.
Yeah, because you've got two police boards, right?
Yeah. So that was their two questions that came forward last night.
Because, yeah, you give it a shot.
So, this is part of the challenge that the legislation has thrown at us. My understanding is that at the time of conception of the different detachment boards, each municipality was provided the where you fall and one seat only. So in the case where a municipality has expanded between two, there was a choice made at that time as to which one you would sit on and the representation of that. And I know that there's been discrepancy. Some municipalities have clearly stated that they were never given a choice. The province believes that happened, and I'm not going to, I think that there's, having seen the rest of the legislation, I do think that there has been some certain gray area and assumptions made on those, but you have one seat at the board, and that seat is where, so in the case of Adnas and Bromley, they have a seat at this board, so decisions and everything that happens at this board is the kind of the voting power. If something else is happening in another another detachment board, then I believe you're allowed to attend, but that you have no strong voice. So you're advocating through your other board members that, so does that, I'm not sure if that, I know it is a very difficult situation in this board. I do know that both Whitewater region and Adnas and Bromley, I'm not aware of anybody else, but I do know that those two municipalities have a seat here and unfortunately do not have a seat on their other one. So a strong advocacy through their other members of the board, and hopefully it's representative of their overall intent of what you want to see happen.
That was the only two questions. Other than that, they had already gave a resolution and a green light towards the budget, and they just had just a note just regard with the shared service like some of the other smaller municipalities had. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, perfect. Greater Madawaska is having their council meeting this afternoon, and John, I'll be declaring conflict because as the chair of the board, I wasn't sure, and it's better to err on the side of caution. So I'm stepping up for that discussion, and John will be in the room to answer any questions that come up. And Renfrew is having theirs.
Do you want to take this one?
No. That's why we have you here.
Through you, Chair, this is when the clerk of the hat, or hat clerk gets muddled. This will come forward to council. I'm not positive that it'll be discussed at the November 26th meeting at this point in time. A request has been made that it be put onto the agenda. I don't know where that stands just at the moment. Otherwise, it'll be at the December 10th meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. I know Horton, we're discussion at our last council meeting was to wait until this meeting was
Perfect.
over and done and approved. And they may be seeking a delegate as well to
Okay.
speak to our township as well.
Happy to come.
Perfect.
All right.
Pop over to.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nothing for closed. And then to correspondence, there was two packages attached in our Interestingly, the Detachment Board Remuneration Survey is rather topical. It was a very small survey. I'm hoping that they do another one towards the end of this year to help feed into the 26. And then the Ministry of Solgen provincial appointee update. We're still, all boards are still having a struggle to get provincial appointees. Again, the legislation. So, and as Mayor Donahue said at the beginning of this in his delegation, this is the foundational part, right? Where someone else said you never buy a car its first year out. So we're working through those. Upcoming, notice of upcoming business. Carolyn, do you want to talk about the meeting schedule and conversations you've had?
Through you, Chair. So we were looking at a 2025 meeting schedule. I think both kind of important with regards to the budget and the amount of meetings we had noted as part of the budget, which was 8. I do know that there is a request from the OPP to have a more consistent schedule. That way they can do better planning on their end for attendance. The current acting detachment commander, as well as whoever sits in that place, does very much want to attend these meetings and be part of them and bring forward kind of what's happening at their detachment level. So yes, a request has been made to outline maybe a schedule for the year of 2025 and to, I mean, the same as council, stick with it as best as possible. In discussions, I know we had originally agreed on the meeting for today as well as December. However, we neglected to account for the fact that Whitewater region has one of their committee and council meetings exactly at this time on the 4th Tuesday of the third Thursday. Wow. Third Thursday of the month. So the request is to potentially consider the 4th Thursday, if that works for everybody. December, that doesn't necessarily work because that puts us right in the middle of Christmas. So the request was to potentially change the next meeting scheduled for December to the 12th.
And I do think going into 2025, it's a question to have as we get, maybe we put that on or bring it forward with some recommendations at the next meeting to block the entire year for 26, so it is in. And keeping in mind, we'll have a new detachment commander sometime in the spring because I understand his acting will be over. So either Inspector Ferguson will come back or there'll be another detachment commander brought in. But the stability, it's easier for all of us. I'm personally finding Thursdays hard because it appears everybody likes to do their meetings on a Thursday. Our council meets Thursday, the hospital board meets Thursday. So, Angela?
I'm just, and this is speaking almost out of turn, nothing ever seems to happen on a Monday other than holidays. Mayor McGee just put up her hand. I don't know if she has something, but.
That's our council day. Now, granted, they don't happen until the evening, but there is often a lot of prep and last minute things that get discussed. So,
which Monday?
Alternate Mondays. We are the 2nd and 4th of the month.
So we can do the 3rd Monday of the month? Every second month?
We absolutely could. Yeah, we're the 2nd and the 4th, so we'd be fine with.
Pardon?
Yes, we're the 2nd and the 4th, so we'd be fine with the 1st and the 3rd, obviously.
We would. It's just so Scott asked if we were running the holidays, and we certainly will as we look at the annual calendar, but I think if we use that as a, and it's not to nail it down now, it's just to get the discussion going, and we'll bring it back to the next meeting with.
Absolutely. No, the more the merrier.
I'm okay with the 3rd Monday. Yeah, the 3rd Monday, I'm good.
Through you, Chair, can you just confirm, like, what time were we looking at, like?
10 o'clock? I'm open, I'm just throwing that out.
Okay.
Rob? Through you, Chair. Just quickly looking at the meeting, looking at the calendar. So it would, the third Monday would affect both February, the Family Day long weekend, and the long weekend in May. So we would adjust that. But what I could suggest is if the board is agreeable to those, as potentially those times, is that I can lay it out nice, prettily color-coded on a schedule and bring that forward to the December meeting.
If we do the third Wednesday, and we're meeting every second month, we would do one in January. We would not have one in February, so we would go into the March. But I'll leave it. Yeah, I think you're right. Let's just put it on a lot to be done before December 31st. I wonder if we could have a board meeting December 31st at 4 o'clock. But just to download things that you have to give us.
Through you, Chair. I'm confused. Are we talking about Monday or Wednesday?
Monday.
You said
Yeah,
Wednesday.
you said Wednesday.
Sorry.
So I'm like,
Jet lag, sorry. Monday. Monday at 10.
Okay, so I am going to take a look at, I'm going to put that out onto a calendar and bring it forward on the December meeting. I still think we need to potentially look at December. So the third would be the 16th, if we kept that same schedule. I'm not here. But I
you're
could
not
probably,
here anyways.
December,
But December's already marked as the Thursday, is it not?
so there was through you, Chair, there was a request that the 19th, which is the original day that we had proposed, be moved potentially to the 12th, if that worked for the Thursday of that month, because it did directly conflict with Whitewater Region's meeting, council meeting. However, we could keep that, if the 12th does work for all members of the board present here today, then we could keep that date and then look at the Monday schedule for January on.
Glenn?
Walking.
Our rec meeting, pardon me, our rec meeting is at 9:30 on.
At 10:30?
9:30 on the second Thursday of the month, but I'm co-chair of it, so I could.
Okay.
Well, if we're still trying to, you know, if we want to.
Well, this is just the one meeting in December, correct?
Yeah, yeah, so, okay, fair enough.
Would the 12th in the afternoon work?
So what are we talking about?
Just the meeting, the board meeting for December. Just a one time. We're set for 25. We're just, Ange?
I can, it would just, I would need to be out of here by 4:30 because we have a finance and admin meeting at 5.
I'm in favor of that.
Thank you.
Trust us, if we're starting at 10 o'clock, we're out of here long before that.
No, if we switch the
Through you, Chair. So I will circulate this in an email because I do know that there's a lot of back and forth. I'm going to propose December 12th at say 1 o'clock. I will send that out to the OPP to see if that works on their end. Again, we do try to establish our meetings at the OPP detachment. We've been 1% successful on that thus far, but again, we do want to ensure that we are including them. So I will propose that, and then if that falls through, or if there's a suggestion, maybe we'll have to go back. We will try at the OPP detachment board if possible. I do know that there was a switch in the schedule today. I'd like to avoid confusion for both the board members and the public. And then I will also, as part of that, look at laying out a potential 2025.
Perfect. Angela?
Just, again, thinking out loud, I'm doing that a lot today, my apologies. If moving forward the reliability of the availability of the detachment office is in question, we initially talked about rotating through our municipalities. so that nobody has to drive the same distance every time. Some people actually get to stay closer to home, that kind of thing. That could be something that we could look at as well. And then all municipalities are included, and maybe we don't get, I don't know, as cozy in one spot as when we move around and we're more aware of the people we're working with. Just a thought.
I think as we get closer to organizing 25, we need to have a discussion about the meeting place. The OPP is where the old board traditionally met, and it's important to have the independence. When Inspector Ferguson was there. No, did they met here? Where did they meet?
We met there, at the OPP station.
At the police station, yes.
Admaston met in Admaston.
Huh.
The detachment commander came to us, and it was a non-issue.
Interesting.
Two separate.
Yeah, back
Yeah,
in
two
that-
separate
that-
boards.
that time. But there's also the role of the OPP at the board, because they're not technically directors of this board.
No.
And we will slowly start to see that agenda. They'll come to do their report, but this is a governance board, and we will have discussions where it would not be appropriate for them to be part of. So there's all of these nuances that need to get worked out in the new year, and we haven't had a chance to have that discussion. But it is, technically let's see how the OPP do when we have the conversation with them next month or even in the coming weeks about the 25 blocking of the days. And
Because
Scott?
I thought that was the whole thing about going over there. And from what I understand is it's open today. There's nobody in there. So I'm getting really confused and kerfuffled that, the board is not having a say on where we're supposed to have our meetings. And the meeting is, was to be at the OPP station. So it just seems like it's not, yeah.
I'm going to let Carolyn.
Through you, Chair. The detachment commander reached out to me personally last week. He was supposed to be in attendance of this meeting. He has been called away along with Staff Sergeant Boza. So with their absence from the detachment, they had requested that we not hold that meeting there specifically because that they felt there wasn't any support for this board at the detachment office. So they had asked for it to be switched. So I had released the agenda, I had indicated the location to be there, I had all that in place, again with also live streaming through their setup. They had asked that we move the board meeting for November. My understanding is that they're still fully capable and ready to go for December, although we are now changing the date, so we will have to double check that with them. So just, I know we're comfy here in Renfrew, and I don't want the board to perceive that as a me factor. I have made every effort to move us over to the OPP Detachment Board, OPP Detachment since the onset of this, but it has been rocky.
Rob, may I? So I think one of the things here is the role of the board. Our role is to govern that OPP detachment.
Correct.
Right? We're to set strategy, which is new to them. When you do that, and again, I think from a organizational perspective and a cultural perspective, we need to do that in their house. Right? There's a recognition that when the board comes in, this is the board overseeing and reporting on the detachment commander.
That's right.
It's really hard to do that remote. Right, to keep us at arm's length, and for the OPP generally do that, right? When I look at other boards I sit on, you have board meetings in their boardroom, right? Their senior management will attend because they meet the board members, right? Because sometimes you want to skip level and say, yeah, it's been nice to talk to the inspector, but how are the sergeants doing? Right? And I look at some of the challenges already on terms of detachment, from hiring problems to some others. Are they systemic problems? Like if I look at our detachment, we haven't started pulling apart their numbers. We haven't started pulling apart their churn rates. We haven't sorted their retention rates. We haven't looked at their sick days. We haven't looked at, the detachment actually has a horrible record on sick days. Right? And how many people are being paid? And is that systemic? Is that, and we don't know yet. So I think it's going to be really important to establish, and by this, our governance role into this board. Because otherwise, it's very happy for the OPP to say, hey, yeah, really nice board, and the municipalities pay for it, right? But we really don't care. It's really easy to do that if you keep us out. So I think it's really important that we have a board meeting in that detachment, we have the detachment commander there, and start to talk about OPP detachment governance. Because at the moment, we're in the mechanics of setting up a board. We actually haven't done our job yet.
That's right.
We haven't actually got to doing our role of governing the OPP, right? We're down into the weeds of budget, which I get, all we need to do. But until we get into that boardroom in the OPP detachment, we sit there and we say, so, talk to me about churn, talk to me about retention, talk to me about call rates, talk to me about, response rates, talk to me about who's on shift at night, right? Until we get there and say, and does this fit the strategy, right? And whether our strategy is around, domestic violence, whether it's around mental support, right? Where do they have gaps that they're identifying that we can then represent on their behalf, right? Because we have a different channel, right, other than the OPP. So my point is really sort of reinforcing that to say, at some point we need to be sitting in their house, having their team there and saying, okay, here's a scorecard for the strategy we gave you. We're going to hold you to account for that. And until we're there, we still haven't achieved our aim as a board or a goal. And I think we can only really do that in their house. So I like the idea of rotating. It could be that at least once a year we go somewhere else, be it Amazon Brobley, be it Madawaska, doesn't matter, right? It's just good to get us out. But I think the majority of ours have to be in the OPP shop, because even those OPP constables need to see us and go, oh, there's the governance board. Right? And until we do that, we're still this thing that they can just, doesn't matter. Right? And I think that's really important to establish that from a culture perspective.
And it's a cultural expectation as well from the OPP, because this is also new for them. And they have not had the aha moment yet. So when they'll call asking us to move a meeting, it's not their meeting. It's the board's meeting, and they're the guest of the board. Angela?
Through you, Chair. So I agree. I agree 100%. But how do we tell them we're having a meeting there? Because we did, and they just told us, no, we're not.
So there's obviously going to be flexibility, right? But again, this is part of sort of the chair's, it's like chair-CEO relationship, right? The most important thing a board does is hire and fire a CEO, right, generally. Our most important job is going to be governing that, that inspector and giving him a scorecard to say, because we're reporting on you, right? That's effectively what we will do back to the, back to the province, is we're reporting on that. Does being pushed out of a meeting room colour that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so, and then to Rob's point, that's a culture thing, right? It's kind of the underlying thing. So again, to come back to your point about saying, can they push us off? Sure, they might be busy, they might be doing something. Does that colour our perspective? Yep. And until they realise that matters, it's still their building, it's still their resource, they can still, have calendar challenges. But I think that comes back to saying, how do they prioritise the role of the board in terms of the overall policing of this area?
Discussion for next meeting. But valid points. I mean, it's transitional for all of us, and we're in a situation where we have an interim detachment commander who will not be staying because he has other activities, which puts us back into our work plan again. One of our mandates is to assist in the selection of a new detachment commander, so we'll be called to that. So there's this cognitive and operational change that's happening, and I think once we get through this implementation and the noise of the budget and getting ourselves organized and insurance and our policies and procedures in place, we haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about, as a board, what do we do? Where do we want to go? What's our work plan? What are the key things that we want to accomplish in 2025? And it will be the relationship with the OPP. And reporting and what's useful for us, because the reporting is not just on stats, it's on information that helps us determine how our priorities are being implemented. Carolyn? I'm watching time.
Yeah. Sorry, through you, Chair. And just to add to what you're saying and what the members are here saying is that I do feel it's very important that the board be able to have its own independence, right? One of the reasons why the detachment had suggested an alternative location is because they didn't have, there would be no one there for the meeting support part of it. So if the board was more independent and had its own, and I'm just using this as an example, but OWL or way of broadcasting, right? Because the board's transparency is to ensure that these meetings are now live broadcasted, or at least at the very least recorded, right? So if the board is limited on that capacity, then you're reliant on where you're going and who's establishing it. So the OPP was had all the equipment available for us to be able to move forward with the live broadcasting of the meeting, right? Without the support there, then we really, at a short notice, forced back here, which Renfrew has the capacity to be able to do the live broadcasting. I am positive that all the other municipalities have a similar capability. It's just ensuring that we have those means at our disposal. But it might be something that the board consider, you know, a purchasing an OWL or something that would allow the board to have a bit of flexibility to, doesn't matter where we go, we can set up a shop.
We talked about that in the budget, and there is money in the 25 budget for technical assistance. But again, I still think it's important to have that conversation with OPP. Our mailing address is there. Everything else is set up as a structure. It's a question of we don't need, if it's a situation where the detachment commander or the staff sergeant isn't available, there could be somebody else in the building that can provide us access to that room. We don't need either of them there. But those are the conversations we'll have going forward as we...
Office manager,
That's right.
you know, and just, since you were just speaking... Sorry, Lisa. Since you were just speaking about purchasing an L, I just looked it up here quick. An L3 top of the line is $1,500.
Yeah.
Ships in 2 days. So... you know, it's something that, you know, you can't get any newer than that, and it's only $1,500.
I'm cautious of our time. Lisa, did you have a hand up?
I didn't, but I am watching the time. I do have at 12 o'clock, so
Okay, perfect.
I'm good for another 5 minutes or so.
Well, we're just about to go into adjournment. We have the meeting date set. We kind of just went off on a bit on the building, but I'm doing a quick round table. John, Eve, Jason, Angela, Glenn, Scott. Perfect. All right. Thank you, everyone. Oh, Karen? Oh, sorry. And I couldn't see where Jason was pointing.
Just very, very, very quickly, it has to do with our name.
Oh, yes.
And we can absolutely table it or until next meeting, but I did some digging, and we do not have to be called the Renfrew OPP Detachment Board. It has to, this is from Lisa Darling, it has to encompass the area. And I think that before we call ourselves the Renfrew area officially and brand the snot out of ourselves, I think we need to sit down and think about how we can make it so that it actually includes all 7 municipalities without signaling, having any one focused on. So for next meeting, because this is not the time to discuss it, but for next meeting, I have like 8 suggestions that could be mixed and matched and whatever. And it would be smart to make sure we have the name that we're going to move forward with. We are not the only detachment board dealing with the name. But before we move forward with something definite and bank account and branding and letterhead, I think we need to discuss who we're going to be.
I think we do have an email. Do you want to send them around by email?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When we first started, it was Renfrew O.P.P. Detachment, Renfrew an area, but we've been having chats with the ministry as well. So,
So through you, Chair, just formally on that, Angela is correct on there is flexibility as to the different names. They're actually suggesting that whatever the board does come up with, that they actually pass it by law at one of the meetings. I do know that this board initially started based on the ministry as the Renfrew Police Service OPP Detachment Board. Based on that, the board discussion in the later part of the, or early part of the summer was to change to the Renfrew and area OPP, but certainly before branding and everything else happens, the board should be agreeable to it. So if you want to send them to me, I can circulate to the group, and we can have some fulsome discussion at the December 12th.
all right, perfect. With that, it is 11:51, and I'd like to call the meeting to adjournment. Angela and John? Don't need a motion. Oh, don't need a motion? No. We are still live. And I have